Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here again. There's a lot of familiar faces here, which is awesome, and some new people as well. So my name is Val. I am one of the organizers of the program called Bloom. So we are a blockchain development program, and we're specifically designed for women and genderqueer folks to get into the Web3 space. So this is our fifth, I believe, Fireside chat that we've had. It's the last one of our first season of Bloom. So we're ending with a good note, having Dor here. So yeah, I will let Dor introduce himself. I won't go ahead and introduce you, but I will say that Comity Labs is one of the sponsor companies for Bloom Season 0. Super happy to have them on board. And Dor is the founder of Comity Labs. So from there, Dor, do you want to just start by kind of saying who you are?
Yeah, thank you so much, Val. First of all, I'm so happy to participate in this first season. I just kind of stumbled onto it and was really, really excited by what Val does. And we chatted on Discord, and I was like, let's make it happen. So my name is Dor. I'm the founder of Comity Labs. The company was just me until this week, where we onboarded our first employees. My previous role was at Lyft, where I led the bike, scooters, and transit team. And before that, worked on marketplace and shared rides. I've been working in rideshare for like 5.5 years, and before that, Groupon and some other companies. I've been actually working on marketplaces for over a decade, and really love marketplace. I see everything I see as a marketplace, including some of my personal relationship, which is not a great recipe for success in personal relationships, by the way.
Cool. Okay, that's a great start. So a lot of experience in rideshare, a lot of experience in marketplaces, and congrats on having your first new person to the team. That's a big milestone. So just tell us about Comedy Labs and what Comedy Labs is.
Yeah. So I kind of go and go the roundabout way to explain. So I think for me, if you think about my journey, I've mentioned Groupon, I've mentioned Lyft and Uber. It was areas I really liked while I was not a particular fan of the Groupon product. And in fact, I actually made my parents stop using Groupon because they kept going to like bad places and buying useless shit. But I really love the idea of like bringing some of the things that work very, very well from e-commerce to local commerce and helping local commerce because, I love cities. I like walking in cities. I want brick and mortar retailers to be strong and stronger. So if you think about these places, I'm always like very, very mission driven at what I do. I kind of am both a complete skeptic, but also drink the Kool-Aid at the same time. And all these companies had seen this explosive growth and were places that generally people really loved working. And then, as it grew, at least my perception of it, and I know it's recorded, don't want to throw anyone under the bus or something, it's my perception of it. It became less of a fun place to work. And we actually became less and less efficient. And it kind of became misaligned. And I've seen it happening over the last 10 years of my career in three places I really, really cared about and loved and couldn't stop thinking about the work. So that's like one thing that was really troubling for me is like, why does it keep happening when you have like these companies, they grow, they theoretically should have more assets to be successful, and they actually become less and less efficient. So that's like a mission or something I really, really cared about. And it was just like, not only do I want to work on tools to help that, but I want to deeply understand the problem and maybe show that you can do in an organization where this doesn't happen, because this was not like just topical to Lyft, Uber, and Groupon. Like when I had conversations, this basically has been an experience of everyone I talked to that was in a hyper growth company. So that's like one kind of thing to keep in mind in my story. The other kind of arc in this story is my last role. Before I did product and engineering stuff, mostly on the software side, my last role, I had to go into a role where there's a lot of hardware involved and like pretty heavy supply chain and like logistics. We have 100,000 vehicles on the road. And just as I got into this new role, pretty much like, we had to do a recall because batteries exploded. So when people say I have fires at work, I don't think many had literal fires. but I had literal fires as I got this new role. So I'm an incredibly lazy person, but if I do something, I want to do it well. So I suddenly lead all these people. I wanted to be the best leader I could, and I was not a domain expert. So it was really interesting, kind of a challenge. Like, how do I add value to the team? Meaning like learn and understand what to do, and how do I get transparency to what's happening? Because we have batteries on fire. We have a product that can cause harm if we fuck up. I'm new in this role, out of my comfort zone. We just bought a company that had like its own debt, its own culture, its own set of people, merging into this company that is different. So that search around how do I become a better leader have kind of got me thinking like, my business unit can be worth, $10 billion, or it can be a liability to Lyft because things can continue exploding. And I don't have really good tools. And that's both like actual technological tools, but even just like, emotional support, help, and this to how to learn how to be a good leader. So I started thinking around, how do I get more transparency? And not just me understanding what's happening. How do I give transparency to people in the organization understanding what's happening, and kind of let them have the right tools to flag, hey, we see a problem here, or hey, I think we should do that. So that search around kind of like the tooling and the framework and the right org design, and have led me to look at like, how do we redo compensation? How do we change performance management situation? How can I avoid a situation where 5 months later, people's like, oh, we warned that this could be a problem, but it's not documented anywhere. So kind of what Comity is, and Comity Lab is just a kind of a fuse of a lot of these things, which is how can I help group coordinate, and how can I solve this like human coordination problem / misaligned incentives in an organization. So I know it's like been a roundabout way to explain what we're about, but that's like some of the things that I really care about, and why I wanted to start our own company and focus on this space. And by the way, should be really interactive. Feel free to ask questions, or this. It's going to be more fun for me and hopefully for you too.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. That's, I feel like there's a lot of like stuff to process inside of that, and like brings up a lot of ideas. So as you're talking about kind of being in these ecosystems or being in these companies where you're seeing a lot of growth, right? And you're kind of feeling like the strains of that growth. So that is like one way to kind of describe some of the pains that we see in Web 2, right? In Web 2, we have these companies that, go to massive growth and like become unicorns. And like the kind of problem within that is, how do we ensure that we stay efficient? How do we ensure that like people who are contributing to the value that's being created are feeling good about that? And we're also able to deal with the crises, right, that come up. And so like, how would you describe kind of the problem, like the core of the problem that Comity is aiming to solve?
I think to me it's like a misaligned incentives. Like that's reducing the problem, but I think it's really misaligned incentives. And I think what's interesting with Web3 is currently, until there's like more zero knowledge proof and private networks, like there's a lot more transparency. And by the way, the fact that things are visible doesn't always mean they're transparent, because there's also like, you sometimes get obfuscation by the fact that everything is visible, but that's like an entire different rat hole. But I think how I see in Web3, like you have more visibility of what's happening. Things are on chain. Like you have a ledger describing what happened. That's one way. You have more flexibility, designing a token or designing an incentive that can be directly correlated to that. That is more flexible than equity, so to speak. And even those is a bit more visible. So I think kind of how I see it's changing, and I think some of the innovation I see is this like ability to use some of the technology or some of the paradigms that it brings around governance, around transparency, around flexible token mechanics, and use these to provide better tools to align groups and understand someone's reputation across a set of decisions or a set of expertise. If you think about why do people care, myself included in the past, so much about their titles, or like how big is the P&L of the business unit they manage, or how many, because when they go look for another job, that's why people ask about it. And why do people ask about those things? Because those are the things that is easily verifiable and is a good proxy to the rest of the things. Like people can't like ask you like show me how valuable you were to the other folks, because you can make up a story. They can't check it. So to me, when you ask me what's like the problem I'm trying to solve, it's more like how can I make sure that I create a system that aligns incentive longer term and give people like the recognition, the obviously ideally the monetary upside, but like not the recognition, the clout slash reputation, however you want to look at it, and the stake in what they do. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that in the space in general, the challenge of aligning incentives is something that most people, I would say, in Web3 care about. And it feels like we do have a lot of tools right now to start getting there. I'm curious also like how you kind of landed on Web3 and DAOs as a solution to this particular problem. Because
Yeah.
obviously the space is like very young. Like we don't have that much mature tools to kind of support some of these things. And these are like really big challenges that you're talking about. So like, how did you find out about DAOs? How did you first start learning about it? And then how did you actually, make the decision to say like, oh, I actually want to explore this space as a solution to this problem that I see?
Yeah, no, great question. So I think I'll again say like a complicated story with some arcs. I think, it really started from me trying to explore how to be a better leader and create more transparency in the organization and empower folks. And at Lyft, I was an executive. I could make some decisions, but there are like some stuff I was thinking about, like, hey, can we make the bonuses way more variable in a way? But then I was like thinking, oh, if it's more variable, how do I like not avoid that it's just about who's more popular or who's this, and how do I not create more problems when it comes to like inclusivity and diversity? So like kind of I started thinking about a bunch of stuff that I wanted to do, and I was just like, oh, this is going to be really really hard to do them. Even things like when you get a job, like you join, you get like your equity, it's fixed, you now have 4-year grant, it's already decided. Someone else who might add like ton more value and joined after you, but just didn't negotiate as well, or got like a worse offer, or like leveled at a different way than like now they have such a big gap, like they can never catch up. Like as many bonuses as you give them, it's not going to help. So I think part of it was more like I looked at the business, I had a bunch of ideas and started working with them, and I honestly felt like no Web2 business will want to do these things, because I was like, it's going to be too drastic for them to change. It's too risky. And like, they're just going to keep saying, oh yeah, yes, people could be more aligned and we could be more efficient, but who knows, maybe it's not going to work. And then we are making hiring harder, or this, it's too big of a risk. So I started kind of looking, and I was like really interested, and I didn't necessarily look at Web3 as a potential client. I actually, one of the first thing I tried to do is like work on kind of a a lattice Workday HRIS type of system. But then when I started talking to HR leaders and founders and this, I was like, none of these fucking people will ever buy this product. Like if they buy it, they're never gonna use it. But like I was like, I'm not gonna let go of it because I'm really passionate. I think it's incredibly useful. And at the same time, I saw what's happening in crypto, and I was just like, wow, this is actually really prime for these types of tooling. So it kind of made sense. And when people ask me, I was just like, it's not that like I wanted to make a crypto company, but I just felt crypto is the best first customer, or Web3 is the best first customer. So that's like one way of how I got there. Parallel, there was another idea I was really excited about. Is I dropped out of high school. I kind of learned everything I could on by my own. By my own means also a lot of network of people, but I was like the driving force. And I care a lot about the people being thoughtful and about their career and growing their career and finding opportunities, which is why kind of we clicked. And I was like, I want to see if I can help. And when I was managing folks, basically every day, someone either my direct report or somewhere down the chain, I mean, it was hundreds of people, would come, and one would say, oh, I want to leave, I'm not growing enough. And I would always ask them, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you want to do next? Like that you're saying you're not growing. Because if this is like a step, or this is like a tool, this job is a tool to get the next one, what's the next one? And people are like, yeah, I don't really know. And kind of gave all these wishy-washy answers. And I was like, no, but like you're saying you're not growing. Like there's some criteria you're evaluating against. Like, what is it? Let me know. Like, not in an attacking way. I want to help you, but I can't help you if you don't tell me what it is. And that kind of made me think about, how do I have all these like incredibly smart people I adore, and their career is one of the most important thing in terms of like, it's one of their biggest financial asset, but it also has such a big impact on their like life and like sanity, health, how much free time they have, how. And I was just like, you spend more time thinking which credit card to buy and on Credit Karma and check your credit score, or you spend more time understanding which like shitcoin to buy than looking at your career, which is your biggest asset, and working it. So another set of ideas I was looking into is more like tools to kind of manage your career. And in this exploration, obviously networks was like the most important thing, because the network help you as much. So one of the crazier ideas I had was, can you take your income, tokenize your income, create like an income sharing agreement, and then give it to people you want to learn from them, and but this gives you an incentive for the network to help each other. So for example, if you went to school with 4 people, one went to like 2 Sigma and is now a trader, another person went to a startup, another person went to Google, you all admire one another, you like each other's talent, why wouldn't you pool your income in return to helping each other, reviewing each other's spec, talking after an annoying conversation with the boss? So I started thinking about like this incentivized little social networks and income sharing agreement for personal growth. And obviously in that realm, I started reading more about DAOs and stuff like that. And so that's kind of like the 2 areas, like both areas led me to the same thing, which was DAOs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Again, like had a lot of interesting things in there. Sharing income and like kind of sharing knowledge with that reminds me a lot of mastermind groups, which I'm a huge fan of. Additionally, we have a question in the chat. So Thakia was asking, how do you figure out what are really well aligned incentives?
I will let you know. I think it's a part of the journey I want to take. I mean, I don't think there's like, I think because groups are evolving and goals are evolving, I think incentives need to evolve too. So I don't believe that is ever like going to be like a steady state. You said something and it will like continue on. So I think like it's less about making sure like what's the right incentive for perpetuity, is what's the right system to understand when things fall out of alignment. And then there's like basic principles that I think is just like needs to be upheld. The kind of surplus value you create needs to be reflected back at you in like some proportional way. There's a lot of things that is kind of hard to quantify. Like for example, there's certain people that their role is not as effective unless something like really goes badly. So like in a steady state, they might not seem to be adding a lot of value. So I think there's like tons and tons of nuance, tons and tons of complication. But like the kind of things to look at is like what type of infrastructure or what type of tools you can create to be open and introspective around like the goals of the group, and then what tools you do to take those goals and to quantify them into like behaviors that are best helping that goals and helping you measure it. So I know I'm like kind of giving a cop-out answer, but I don't think there's like one thing you could do to figure out incentives. And it's more like the thing you need to do to figure out like where you have misalignments.
Yeah, that is a good segue to the second question, which was from Aaron. What technology are you currently working with at Comity Labs? And maybe like, I know it's super early for you, so maybe you could also just say what technologies have you looked at that look promising?
So we looked at a lot of different DAO platforms, and everything from like the latest I looked is like Open Zeppelin's Governor, but and Tribute before from the Open Law. And then obviously there's like Colony, DAO Stack. So we looked at a lot of these like kind of DAO frameworks, either using one or building one ourselves. Like ideally, I don't want to reinvent the wheel if there's things that are already useful. There's also another thing that's kind of different in the Web3. Like you have maybe an incentive to reinvent the wheel if you want to have like a closed garden Web 2.0 business, but anything we're going to do is anyway going to be open source and stuff like that. So this is way less utility than forking and duplicating. So we looked at those. How we see what we're building is, yes, we want to build a mechanism that help you with the DAO, but where we're more interested is the UI of what happens after you have. So how do you communicate with one another? How do you set goals? How do you make decisions? And how do you reward people based on their contribution, or even measure the contribution? Because like even that is complicated. Like for example, like a lot of decisions can look really, really good in a week from now, but terrible like a year from now. What do you do? How do you set reputation? So I think like the technologies we're trying to build is like helping organizations with that part. And the other technology we're trying to build is, I would call like almost like a Genosis safe on steroids. It's like a kind of a group wallet, a group vault with a smart permissioning system that will enable people to make decisions based on kind of how much reputations they have. And depending on that, like they might be able to do different things. So yeah, I covered a lot. So if you talk about technologies, like, you know, our focus, just to be tactical, we're actually not going to go to like the organization I talked in the beginning or the ISAs. We have a very specific niche we're doing, which is like we're focusing on gaming and gaming groups and helping people play crypto games together and own NFT games together. And I can explain why we're starting there and how I think it goes later if someone's curious. But it's our main focus is there. And where we'll have to innovate is on obviously the multi-sig. A lot of the games are going to work on different types of chains, different platforms. So we're going to have to build a ton of bridges or like some frameworks to really think about bridges in a way that works well with these NFTs and actions we want to do. And then we'll have to invest in a reputation system. And obviously there's good UI product around task management and stuff like that, but was not the question.
Cool. So yeah, I would love to hear more about the gaming piece of this too, because that's like a very unique part of the space as well when it comes to DAOs. But before we get there, just one other question that I had. So basically, as you're thinking about, you know, the different tools that you're going to be using for Comity Labs, like what were some of the existing tools that you have come across that you feel like are doing like a good job, or just things that like, you know, you saw and you're like, wow, this is super cool, and that you think are going kind of in the direction that you want to be going as well?
To be honest, there's so many things that like it's hard to. I'm actually mind blown about how many things there are and how many cool projects. I think it's like so refreshing and also so scary. Like honestly, I had a lot of fears going into this area, and a lot of fears in turn, like, oh, I'm an outsider, or oh, this feels way too like I'm going out of my comfort zone, or I'm not like sticking to where my value above replacement is higher. So I feel like really humbled every day just opening Twitter or like going on Discord. So there's a ton of interesting projects. So obviously SourceCred, I think is like doing something. I really like a lot of the ideas in SourceCred. I think the Genosis Safe is like awesome, great documentation, great product, like really great devs. I think, yeah, there's just so many projects, honestly. There's like DAOs that I think are interesting and did kind of pave the way in interesting stuff. I think Pleaser DAO was really kind of pushed the envelope when it comes to, you know, and Flamingo DAO buying assets together and making these like investments groups. I think Open Zeppelin is like really awesome in terms of like using like the business, a very healthy business they have with security audits, but also bringing something back to the community and kind of helping, you know, they create an ecosystem that works kind of really well, I think. Unless maybe there's skeletons in the closet, I don't know. I'm not like affiliated to Open Zeppelin in any way, but you know, they have this like very lucrative money making business around doing audits, but at the same time creating tools that everyone could use to kind of have things more secure that actually just helps their audits, because every contract you look today it just has Open Zeppelin, so of course you trust them to audit it. Actually seeing all these like new chains with like different types of ideas, I think is very refreshing to see people try. Sometimes I think it's like too overwhelming, because I was like, do you really need to do another L1 for this? Like, or will you ever do what you actually say you will do? OpenSea, great to see like the progress, and I think they should be very proud. So yeah, basically almost every project in crypto besides maybe Dogecoin. Joking, joking. Don't want to get in trouble with the Dogecoin mafia here.
Well, yeah, so that's a good list. I feel like there's a lot for people who are just getting into it to explore there.
Uh,
And
Tenderly, I love Tenderly. I
hmm,
mean, if people use Etherscan, they should like use Tenderly too.
yeah, I have used Tenderly before as well, and I really like it as well. And yeah, it would be great too after this if you just like drop, I don't know, a few links or names of some tech that people should look at. So
Yeah,
a
we'll
couple
do.
more questions that came in. What are some of your favorite NFT or gaming use cases on the blockchain?
I think gaming, my favorite is Dark Forest. I don't know if people know it. It actually doesn't have like NFTs in the game yet, but now they're working on a new game, ZK Dungeon, that should have some of it. So if you're passionate about gaming and want to work with extremely talented team, I think the Dark Forest team is awesome. And I also must say that like I'm not a big NFT guy. Like I missed almost every drop of something that is now valuable. I'm slept on. I do really like nouns. I don't know if people are familiar. It's like nouns.wtf, and I hope get one at one day, but like for the prices, I'm very skeptical. There is like Solvency was a nice NFT product. Like honestly, there's like it feels too overwhelming. There's just so many that I feel even bad saying one because I know I forget something that is maybe better or like not better, but like,
Yeah,
just as deserving.
yeah, there's just more and more every day also.
Like Loot
Yeah,
obviously has like such interesting concepts, and I didn't manage to get the original Loot because yeah, I kind of was like I think
I
10
think
minutes too late.
yeah, it was 4 hours total before they
Yeah,
were all gone. So
yeah, I saw it 2 hours later, but then I kind of tried a bunch of IDs and they all were taken, so I was like, oh, I'll try it later, and then later it was already gone.
yeah,
I do have Dope War Loot that I like.
cool. So how about yield games? Someone asked. A16Z. I'm not familiar with
Yeah.
that one, but
So yeah, YGG. I think YGG is interesting. I actually like I started on the gaming thing before I kind of knew YGG, and we also share an investor. I like what they're doing. I think what kind of I'm thinking about doing is or working on has adjacencies in a way that like if you wanted, you could almost make your own YGG for it for a group of folks. But it's way more focused around kind of like the interaction of the group and like the actions that you can do with one another. So if I think about NFTs, like I think NFTs will become more and more complex and kind of graduate. And you actually see it with Loot is a perfect example. Like in a way because it started as like the simple it's just like a text even, but like on top of it you can build more and more things. But even things like Bored Ape Mutant Club where you have one NFTs, another NFT, they have interactions. So one of the theses that I really believe in is that NFTs will become more and more complex, and when you own them in a group you'll suddenly have to make certain decisions. So I think as I see YGG in its current form, it's more focused on like the underlying asset and kind of give you an exposure, almost like a an ETF, but with some other benefits around like playing together. So I think you will get the benefits of playing together, but like I'm more interested in like the interaction of the group and how a group makes decisions together, either inside the game or outside the game.
I just thought they were really interesting because of, well, yield farming is a thing, and this comes out of the Philippines. And when I first saw it, is I was asked by it was the Philippine government, like this is about 2-3 years ago, like what would be areas we should be looking out for and investing in. Everyone said biotech and AI, and I said crypto, games, esports, and blockchain, and everyone thought I was crazy. So when I found them, they got backed, by A16Z is actually pretty huge. Had a lot of other friends who did have blockchain companies, were YC backed, and I asked if they knew them. It was just something that I didn't expect, even though I had said, oh yeah, I think something might come out, but that was not, in terms of yield farming and that sort of like intersection to like really incentivize gamers. So I mean, everything that you said hit the head on the nail. So it makes a lot of sense.
cool.
No, thank you.
So a few more questions coming in. So Sharon is asking, what DAO tooling do you think that the ecosystem still needs? And do you think DAO spending funds or payments, financial incentives are well coordinated? So I guess a two-part question, like what does the ecosystem still need? And are the current things that are set up for funds, payment, and finance for DAOs. Are those doing a good job so far?
I think it needs every type of tool. Like every type of tool, like you might have at like a normal company, so to speak, like doesn't fully work in this Web3 world. Like even things like Okta, like usually Web3 you interface with like your wallet and stuff like, but now someone wants to like make sure you get like a Figma access with this, or this, they now need an email that you need to create yourself, and then managing it. So I think like really like so many things in the stack, from payroll to performance management to just like, permissions, doesn't like will need tooling or will need customization of tooling. And really everywhere you look, even like, things like Anaplan and financial planning tools that businesses use, like for DAOs, needs a special treatment or a different flavor. And I don't think any of these companies, like I don't think Workday will manage to make like a HR system integration that works with DAO. Forget about it. So that's the first part of the question. I think the second part of the question is, there's some people who did like amazing work, and like there's grants program who are, people do like really amazing things. So yes, I think people are doing a good job, but no, I don't think it's like very well coordinated. I think if you actually feel like see how much capital these organizations can deploy versus like how much capital they actually deploy, I think they all know that they deploy far less capital than what they would want. And a lot of time it's hard to make sure that the capital is well used. There is if you go on the maker forums, like, different groups or different of their units have different projects that maybe pay people differently for the same job. I think there's a lot of like historical grants that like, this is not maker, this is a kind of general grants that kind of went out, but didn't have as much rigor around, did the work actually even happen, and did it happen and delivered as promised? So no, I think there's like tons and tons and tons of things that can be improved when it comes of like the usage of the treasury and treasury management. And there is a good Medium post I'll link out later. I think it's someone from maybe Llama. It's like a DAO tooling treasury management that had a good recap. Yeah, I'll share some links.
And then Pikia asked, why gaming? So I think, towards the beginning of this, we talked a lot about, Web2 companies, massive growth, all the coordination problems, and then Comity Labs right now is focused on gaming. So why is that your focus now?
I think it's just like how I see it is like an interesting space where you have a captive audience who's trying to do something and you can help them solve a problem. They're not afraid to tell you what they think. And I think the problem is like a good microcosm. And at the same time, if I actually think about like, group coordination and decision making and like assets and this, I think digital assets in gaming will be the fastest growing. So to me, it just felt like the really great place to start and where I could learn more. Like another kind of, avenue was just like, you could do like, social trading and like more of a fintech kind of stuff and helping people trade. But like personally, I was like less interested around like those mechanics. So
Yeah, I think with a lot of activity, there is opportunity for like fast iterations, which in turn leads to tons of learning really quickly. So Jolene also provided some thoughts and some questions. Jolene, you can just unmute if you want to say what you were typing.
Sure, yeah. So I think this is a really interesting problem space. I worked in engineering management for a little bit as well, and had kind of a lot of the same thoughts about like, why is it that, when we have a bigger team and more resources that, things seem to get worse. So yeah, like the overall vision and what you're trying to do kind of reminded me a bit of like the experiment that Rodelio did at Bridgewater, where you're trying to kind of collect objective feedback about people and create a system where, everything is as transparent as possible, with the idea that it will help people improve and help the teams be more productive. But as far as I've heard about that and read about it, is that it kind of creates a culture where some people really, really like it, I think I would like it, but like it's not for everyone, and that a lot of people really dislike it and didn't want to work in an environment like that, and that's the reason why it hasn't really taken off. So I don't know. I'm like maybe I don't really understand like what the vision is, but I was just curious about how you think about that. Like when you think of it from an organizational perspective, where we want to make a place that as many people as possible, you know, feel comfortable working in, like a system that kind of caters to as many people as possible. Like how do you kind of think about that, or how do you kind of balance those things
Yeah.
that, you know, this might create something that people don't actually want or like?
I think like the dot system and this, I haven't personally experienced it. I think I will be in the buckets of people who do enjoy it. But like, how I see it is, we are starting with like something that is, this is also part of like understanding why gaming, something that is like more something you do for fun in a way, or like not for fun, like some sort of community engagement. It's not like your work. So the idea there is that you actually have more flexibility too, in terms of like what you can share and how transparent you can be, because like the stakes, even at the stakes, these games sometimes have like tens of thousands of dollars of assets. The stakes is still kind of lower than, getting these dots in public in front of everyone on something that like pays your bills to go to work. I think long term, like this will definitely be a challenge that we'll need to walk away, it kind of, find a balance in. And I actually don't see what we're building as this like kind of super kind of dot system where now you get graded of everything and everyone sees your grade. I think where we want to go is just create more tools to not only get the task, but kind of create the incentive so the right people can make the right decisions. And I don't necessarily think it has to be like this fully transparent, everything you do get judged and measured. It's more like, this is what we believe is needed for the group. This is all what we agree on as a group. And this is an incentive for people who are willing to come up and like do it, rather than an environment where like every interaction is measured. But again, this is a very important balance to walk. And like I would also ask the question, why do certain people don't like it? And I would say, I would guess, and we have someone who was at the company, so better to let them speak. I would love if they join. Is the fear that like it will still be not fair in a way, or is this going to be used, and like, do I actually own it? Am I part of it, or am I actually part of it, or just like am I a participant, or just like someone who's just like a pawn in this? And I think like having communities that people start that you control will help with that in the beginning. Hope it made sense. I don't have like the perfect answer to it. This should be a balancing act.
Thank you. And hi, this is Sasha. I am the sister of Val, and I worked at Bridgewater for my first 2 years out of college. I'll give you a little bit of insight on how that was. I agree with your point about just making sure there's balance. And it sounds like you're trying to create some sort of like more evolved version of that, which I think is much needed. So the principles were implemented and the culture was implemented when Bridgewater was like a 20-person company. And as you scale to like 2000, you lose a lot of that close-knit community and interaction. And so when you are, to your point, implementing dot systems and ratings, like how authentic are those when people don't know each other as closely as they would at, an earlier stage in the company? And so I would see, we're getting recorded by cameras. We can't have our phones on the floors, but it's just being implemented in a inconsistent way. So if somebody who was not well liked had their phone out, that would be like reported as in like the dot and issue log system. Whereas somebody else who was like well liked and had their phone out wouldn't get like reprimanded at all. So I think it's because as a company grows, like how are you making sure that it is a meritocracy and making sure that those interactions are in the best interest of that person for constructive criticism, rather than starting to get into the like bureaucratic, like politicking world that nobody loves at a larger company.
Yeah. By the way, Sasha, I would love to pick your brain a bit more after. I know a bunch of people work in Bridgewater. Always fascinating.
Yeah, would love to chat. Organizational like psychology and the incentives is something that I think is super interesting, and I've seen it on like that extreme, and now I'm at Facebook, so it's a different extreme where we have performance reviews twice a year, but now we're moving to a 1 year. So I think it's like there's so many different ways you can go about it, and I think the biggest piece is keeping the culture as you scale.
Cool. So we are actually at time right now, but if people can stay, I'd love to just address some of the final questions that we have here. So one question from Sharon was just curious, does Comity Labs currently run as a DAO?
We are not. I actually did look at it at the beginning, but then I was just like, it's gonna be harder to get people working for this DAO. I'm gonna limit this thing. So now we're not run as a DAO. Our idea is to kind of decentralize with time and do run like as a DAO of DAOs. For example, if you could almost imagine that we're going to support a bunch of games, we want to take these like game communities, spin them off as its own DAO, and then have like a token connected to the kind of parent company that like would be bonded to it. And so like the idea is later on to be a DAO of a DAO. Just the experience of actually thinking about the company kind of showed me how much stuff there is to do. So for example, one of the things I wanted to do was something that like the founder of Groupon tried to do in his next company that is now defunct. He wanted to do this like progressive equity, which the idea is, and I'm gonna botch it, but the idea is that everyone in the company has a number. Let's say you make 50 million, 20 million, and you're saying this is kind of like, you know, the fuck you money level, and like above it, if your equity is worth above it, you are now getting taxed by half, and you give to the pool, and that pool helps other people get to that number. So the idea is to smooth out the earning. So for example, when I started the company, it was really, I was like, oh, I definitely want to do it because, you know, like I want to be a smoother earning for people in a company. But even that was like, you know, people saw these legal documents. It's like, can you do like a normal and just like add more option pool? And just it would cost like, you know, like hundreds of thousands of dollars just to manage that program. Like before I even know if like the company is gonna pick up. So it just, even like doing something like this, I was like, oh, you know, it's like really actually hard to do as a founder to make the organization as aligned. Because if I did DAO, there's like half the people I'll talk to will like be afraid to work. How do you even like structure it? How do you raise money to a DAO that is not just like, you know, tokens? So yeah, it's not a DAO. I would love to make it a DAO. I would love to find other mechanisms to make sure that we are aligned, because now the mechanism is the people who join kind of trust me that like, you know, as the founder, I will like align. And, you know, the thing with trust is like, you know, it's nice, but like these agreements and this, you need them when like there's some problems with trust. Like, so I do want to focus these things, but like obviously I will always do whatever I can to treat people as I want to be treated.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common in the space too, that you know, organizations start more kind of traditional, more centralized type startup, and then over time, at least in the Web3 space, over time become more and more decentralized, you know, decentralize their governance and look like more like a DAO. But I think it's also cool because like this thing that you're talking about, progressive equity, I'm not familiar with it, but DAOs like are kind of this playground for things like that, because it's just so much easier to like program logic to do that, and can be easy to like simulate some of these things without having to go through all the hoops. So yeah, that's super cool. Last question I have for you before we let everyone go is what kind of team are you trying to build? So you talked a little bit about how your team is structured, and I know that you're hiring. So, you know, what's kind of the ideal for people to come on board to Comity Labs?
Yeah, no, that's honestly, we're still figuring this out too. I mean, I do know, obviously I want like, you know, our main focus now is engineers, and we want like the the best engineers there. I think things that we know we care about is we want people who are really curious and want to understand what they work on and like kind of go deep on it. I think that's like really, in our job posting, if you read them, like we put a lot of emphasis on this, and we also like want people who are really passionate about something, even if it's not work, that can like go and talk about it for an hour or write about it. Because I think we do want this like curiosity. I think is really, really big for us. Is curiosity and ability to challenge norms. I think technically, I do think that like and this is something I might say something that's complete bullshit, but like while Solidity and this and a lot of it is kind of TypeScript, I actually think like the logic and frame of thought is actually closer to framework firmware and lower level. So ideal candidates or candidates I see and I'm kind of really excited about is actually people who used to work on like firmware or FPGAs or worked on, had some background with like C projects or assembly. Graphics background is something I really, really like because it's like freaking hard. So that's like one. And the other is just like, like the thing that was really important is just like having like a conviction around we want to make groups better and we want to make group interactions better, and that's like our focus, and it's a really important mission because everything we have in this world is pretty much made by teams. So I think like the idea of like excitement around trying to make tools for group as a long-term goal, and knowing that it's actually really, really hard and we might need to do a lot of detours, but like we all want to do this thing is like one. I think technical abilities when I'm looking at engineering is incredibly important, and I want someone who has like worked kind of up the stack, actually someone who started really low level, kind of worked up the stack rather than the other way around. We actually do tons and tons of interviews now, and it's really important to us that people know this like very, very kind of fundamentals around how do you manage your own memory, how does things get stored in memory, how do you manipulate all these like strings, and people like, oh, this is kind of like a lead code exercises are not really important, but like the Ethereum, just like simple computer, like all you need to do is deal with like hashes, numbers, and counting. So it's pretty important to have those basics. And last is like I just really want curious people that like look at something and it's quick enough to jump to a conclusion, but then as curious enough to kind of look beyond it and kind of see what's not in the surface. So yeah, again, hand wavy explanation, but I hope it helps.
Yeah, I love that. Quick enough to come to a conclusion, but curious enough.
Yeah, I know you talked about engineering and I saw a couple of roles there. Are you looking to explore other types of roles like marketing or overall strategy?
We are looking for like it's a role we haven't put up, kind of a community / marketing role that I think is going to be incredibly important for us. So yeah, that's one role that like we're adding now. Strategy, I must say that like this is kind of my skeptic. I always like skeptical around like strategy roles, like kind of as an umbrella. So, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to utilize it, but things that need to be done, like for example, it's how to build our community, how there's a bunch of projects that we really like, a lot of things I read that I think are very, very relevant to what we do. So even that our product is not out, we can already kind of attract people by like showing them what we care about, what we believe in, what we think is interesting. So yeah, community building / the growth marketing, however you want to look at it, is a top priority role. It's just not online yet. I'm also honestly, Comity Labs was just like a name that like I needed for the incorporation, and I tried to think about names, and the meaning of Comity is just like kind of agreement between nations to work for the greater good. So I think it worked for me from a conceptual meaning, but like we're actually gonna think about our branding a bit and things like that as like we're going to announce. We just raised another round too, so we're going to do some press around it, and we might rebrand.
Nice. Yeah, I will reach out to you after the call to talk about Bridgewater and that as well.
Perfect.
Great. Thanks again, Dor, so much for partnering with us and being a part of the Bloom community. We really appreciate that. And thanks for the Fireside chat as well. It was a really great discussion.
Yeah, this has been great. It's the first time I actually talked in public about Comity, and I'm always extremely nervous when things are recorded because I curse a lot and I'm not like the most concise person. So yeah, no, this has been a great, awesome experience, and so happy about what you do, Val, and like the rest of the team.
Thanks. All right. Bye, everyone.